Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a packed show for you this evening with two special guests. One of them, Pastor Arthur O'Malley, who is going to be the main guest. I'm going to be introducing him later on, and we're going to have a fascinating discussion. But before that, I'm going to talk about a few news items and then also introduce another guest as well, one of our candidates in the council election, who's going to speak to us about a particular issue for a while. So what's been going on in the news? Well, there's quite a lot to go through here, so I'll try and go through quite quickly. Well, in Florida, you might have been following the story that the governor there is really going on the front foot to cut out the sexualization of children and indoctrination into gender ideology in Florida schools. He's been absolutely explicit about it. He's made it a very major campaigning theme, and there's a real popular movement to get this stamped out in schools in Florida. If only that would be the case in Scotland, but it just shows what can happen, that public opinion can turn on this sort of indoctrination and corruption of children in schools. Similarly, in Hungary, you might have seen that there was a presidential election in Hungary just recently, parliamentary election. And alongside it was a referendum. And the referendum included several questions, again, about the indoctrination and corruption of school children with sort of LGBT ideology, queer theory, etc. So it put it to the population. Do you want this to be happening in schools or not? And the things were rejected by between 92 and 96% of the population. In other words, like the Scottish government's idea of like LGBT inclusive education, that sort of policy was rejected by over 90% of the voters in Hungary. Over 90% of the people rejected it. How many people would reject it if people actually knew about it and it went to a referendum in Scotland? Well, maybe it will. Maybe it will. Let's see. Time will tell. Another snippet. Well, was it last week? Last week's guest, Claire Chor, was it the week before? She was going to come on. She forgot to tune in. Afterwards, someone sent me an email saying, do you realize that Claire is a Nazi? So I was a little surprised because I'd done a spot of online research about her. I'd seen a few things, seen a YouTube channel, hadn't really got anything of that impression. And they sent a picture of her holding a gun in front of a swastika flag with a sort of Hitler smiley face T-shirt on. So I asked if it was her. She said yes. I said, can you explain what attracts you to a sort of evil, genocidal tyrant? And I haven't had any reply from that. So it just goes to show, doesn't it? People might not always be what they see. Maybe Claire will come back. It did make me think, would I have someone like that on to debate with him? And it certainly would be a debate to try and point out the error of her ways, basically. The risk would be, your YouTube channel might get shut down if you discuss those sort of things. I don't know. But in any case, Claire's gone quiet now. Another thing to mention very quickly, the SNP's party election broadcast has been released. It is utterly atrocious, absolutely negative from beginning to end, just attacking the Conservative Party. And it finishes with this sort of lady throwing a full-size model of a Conservative politician to the ground, which sort of implies uprising, a bit of aggression, put them in their place, throw them to the ground. I mean, it really is unpleasant, sour, totally negative. And the reason I mention that, what a contrast with our party election broadcast. Have you watched it yet? If you haven't watched it, watch it. Not now. After the live stream, go and watch it on our YouTube or Facebook. Totally different. Positive and upbeat message about our policies. Now, it really frustrates me when some people say, well, the Scottish Family Party, you're too negative. What are the other parties like? We would never put something out as a party election broadcast as negative and sour and bitter and aggressive and hostile as the SNP has. And yet I've never heard anyone, Christians in particular, I've never heard them say, oh, I like the SNP's policies, but they're a bit negative overall. And yet people say that about the Scottish Family Party. I say it's completely unjustified. Before anyone says that the Scottish Family Parties, well, you're a bit negative, watch the SNP's party election broadcast and think again. Right, conversion therapy, quick update. The UK government had looked at conversion therapy. They consulted, they spoke to the experts, they thought it through very carefully. They came to the conclusion that a law was not necessary. A conversion ban was not necessary. Existing laws could be used to stop any genuinely objectionable practices. That was their considered opinion after carefully thinking it through. So they announced that. Then LGBT activists sort of threw their toys out of the pram, made a lot of noise, complained, called the Conservatives homophobic and transphobic and everything else. So immediately, the Conservatives said, okay, we'll change our mind then. We will introduce a conversion therapy ban. I mean, that's government by Twitter mob. Any government that acts like that should be utterly, utterly embarrassed that it's willing to throw overboard its own judgment of the wise course of action just to placate a mob. But that's exactly what the Conservative Party has done. So the unjust, religious liberty restricting, freedom of speech restricting conversion therapy ban is on its way through with the UK government and the UK Parliament. And it's already advancing through the Scottish parliamentary system as well in a much worse form. But anyway, enough of that for talk about on other occasions. Right, Rowan Williams, former Archbishop of Canterbury, says he thinks becoming transgender is part of the journey towards becoming whole for some people. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Now, sometimes people say, oh, you're just a religious party. Okay, you're just Christians. I don't know why people say that, because there's an awful lot of Christians who say completely the opposite to what we say. Completely the opposite. Like, Archbishops of Canterbury of various types, retired and current, for example. So it's always interesting. I heard an MSP say once, he was being quite honest about this. He said, we invite Christian groups into the parliaments to give their view on various matters. He said, I sit and listen to them, and it's always the same. Half of them say one thing, and the other half say completely the opposite. So I end up thinking there's no point bringing them in because they just contradict each other and we get nowhere from it. Anyway, so that was Rowan Williams. One last thing for the news. Channel 4 is going to be privatized. And Murdo Fraser, the Conservative MSP, he tweeted, well, Channel 4 is not up to much because they've produced Naked Attraction. Quite agree. Naked Attraction was an appalling television program. Is it still on? Still is? I don't know. I made a video a few years ago called Channel 4 is Sex Mad because they systematically attack every part of the foundations of traditional sexual morality, and they produce series to attack these foundations. So they did the Sex Box, was the Marriage at First Sight. I can't remember the other ones. A whole host of them promoting polyamorous relationships. So I replied to Murdo Fraser saying, yeah, it's terrible, isn't it, the way Channel 4 has been producing this degrading content. But do bear in mind, it's been producing it while it's been under the supervision of a Conservative government. Because Channel 4 is a government agency. So the Conservative government has allowed it to be churning out this, frankly, filth in a lot of cases, corrupting filth. That's been going on under the auspices of a Conservative government. So I don't know if Murdo Fraser shall see. Right, a very important thing to announce, let's just do this now, is our crowdfunder has been launched, which I've just posted in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. So do go to election crowdfunder, campaign crowdfunder. We would appreciate your support. That was just launched a few hours ago. So it would be great if you could chip into that. Right, on to our first guest, who is one of our 84 candidates in the election. We have with us Andrew Muir. Welcome, Andrew.
Hello, how are you doing?
Great, thanks. Now, sorry, I just forgot to explain. We've got a slight time delay on the video with Andrew. So we hear him at the right time, but the video is slightly delayed. But it'll be fine. We'll still hear him very clearly. Now, Andrew, tell us where you are again. Which ward are you standing in?
I'm in West Dumbartonshire, and I'm in the Dumbarton ward. That's where I'm standing.
Okay. Now, Andrew is famous in our campaign so far for claiming to have lost half a stone through leafleting. Is that up-to-date news, or has it gone higher than that?
Well, I've done all my leaflets now, and it's about £8 I've lost. I think I'm stuck there unless I do some more exercise.
Right, very good. So that one of the many benefits of being a Scottish Family Party candidate. Now, the issue that you've got some expertise in, you've focused on a little bit, written something about, is the cost of living crisis. Do you want to give us a quick summary of where you think we are with that issue now?
Well, I'm a pensions actuary, which means I dabble around with figures, and I've done that all my life. And it was actually when I was delivering the leaflets, it was one of the main topics that people wanted to know about. My gas bills are doubling, and my petrol's going up, council tax is going up 3%, beef is going up, petrol's going up, and they just wanted advice. And I thought, well, my local paper is the Lennox Herald, and it's got a circulation of 2,500. That's quite a lot. When you're looking at me, when I'm delivering 8,000 leaflets, that's quite an extra boost. So what I did was I thought, well, the names of the candidates are going to be announced next week. I don't want to put it in then. If I get it in the week before, I have a free ride. It's not political. And guess what? It was the main letter. It was beautiful. I took up nearly the whole page on my topic. It was great.
Yeah. So what's caused this, and what's to be done about it? What policies should be looked at to alleviate the challenges people are facing?
Well, I think you know how income tax is sort of graded, so you get higher levels. It maybe starts at 19, 20, goes up to 40. I think you should do an inclining. It sounds complicated, but inclining tariff charges for gas and electricity, with a lower paid of lower charges. That's one of my main points, but I put in quite a lot of points.
Tell us some more.
Well, other ones. Well, what about pensions? We've got one of the worst pensions in the developed world. We're on basically £10,000 a year. The basic state pension, it only went up 3% when compared to these gas prices doubling. And yet Germany, France, they could be on 15,000, 20,000 a year. So that's something that's my concern. And if you're on a basic state pension, 10,000, I'm coming up to state pension age. I've not got a lot to look forward to.
Mm-hmm. So the fuel cost increases. Is the green agenda makes me sound like I'm very hostile to it, or the moves towards net zero or whatever? Have they played a significant part in that, do you think?
Well, I think the costs are mainly to do with the supply and demand, like Arabia and Russia and places like that, and people stockpiling. I don't know if the green issue has really taken off yet. We just seem to be getting more and more cars. And so I'm not sure that's had an effect. I think it's the world stockpiling and the war and things like that is causing the problems. And also the big profits. These companies like Shell, Esso, they're making big profits. So that's pushing the prices up. It's going in their bank accounts.
Now, I understand, to be fair to these companies, I understand that Shell, for example, made huge losses the year before for various reasons. But with the energy, I tend to think that the more self-sufficient we could be, the better, which means when shocks come along, you've got more flexibility to control things. I mean, the ultimate sort of shock, like, if your supply from outside the country is cut off in the event of war or whatever, that's one situation to bear in mind. But just the ability to control the market a little bit at times when when a crisis might loom. I just think energy independence is very important for a nation. I think it's quite short-sighted to be relying massively on other countries for energy supply.
Well, yeah, I agree, especially Russia, and maybe we don't want Saudi Arabia as well. We've got a lot of wind in Scotland, and we need. Well, that was one of my things on my leaflet. I was trying to get it across to different people, and one was conserve our environment. So we do need to look at more normal, natural energy types, like I say, wind and things like that, and maybe get less oil and gas.
Yeah, I think the wind power, obviously the problem is its intermittency. So there's got to be backups available. I think Scotland basically exports renewable energy. It generates a lot more than it can use. But at the times when the renewable energy is not producing enough, then we're net importers of electricity and fossil fuels. as well. So it's quite a difficult equation to balance, I would say. But in terms of the people facing the squeeze for that, I mean, there's so many things coming along together. But could the argument be, though, the more the government spends to alleviate that, then the less your money becomes worth, because that's going to create inflation. I mean, the government already is overspending massively. We're in huge debt. The UK pays more in debt interest than we spend on defence. So is this just one too many problems for the government to try and buy its way out of, to pay its way out of?
Well, I think we've had a lucky time of it over the last 20, 30 years, but we have been in debt. We spend quite a lot of money on public services like the health and the police. So it's coming back to bite us a bit now. And as I say, the population is growing as well. And I think it's all to do with the Earth's resources are under pressure, global warming, and I'm just seeing what else, other things. We've got another thing I mentioned is the national insurance. They're going up, the cost of care. We've got that's a massive big burden on society with the older generation as well. There's just so many things coming together, and I think the golden generation after the war had it best, and now I think the decades we're in with the COVID, the war, are tougher times. Global warming, we've got all these things to deal with.
Yeah, I think with the care for the elderly issue, a big part of that is the demographic problems. That while you've got a growing population that tends to look after itself, when you start seeing population decline on the horizon, then suddenly that becomes a huge crisis. I mean, family party policy, by the way, is that there's no way this could be done in the short term, but in the longer term, the ideal would be people pay national insurance. That money is saved to be spent on that generation in their retirement. So if you've got a big cohort, if you like, going through the system, they will have a larger pensions and care pot available for them in their retirement. But at the moment, I mean, for decades, governments have treated national insurance just like tax income. So they just get it and spend it, which is really irresponsible. If anyone ran their personal finances like that, we'd think they were being highly irresponsible. But that's the way the government's done it for years. I mean, getting back to the responsible way would be very, very difficult. It would be a very long-term project. But ultimately, I think that should be the aim. As an actuary,
people are having to work longer. Like my parents retired in the 50s, but I'm now in my 60s. I've got no intention of stopping. Just carry on. My daughter, as I say in the article, she's a teenager at university. I've got to pay for her with ISAs and stuff like that, driving lessons, all these bills. So my wife as well. So I'd have to keep on working, I'm afraid. As I say, the state pension isn't going to pay enough for all my bills. If I'm getting a state pension of 10,000, my council tax is 2,000, energy to cost 3,000, goes on and on. You have to keep working as long as you can.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are, I think some people are still retiring very early, but a lot of people are feeling that they need to keep working longer and longer. I think it's fine if your job is something that you can continue to do at that age. But if your job's very physical, very manual labor, it becomes quite difficult, doesn't it? Some people are going to really face difficulties with that when they're not able to carry on their job as long as they would like to, as long as they need to, in fact.
But they can switch. They can switch to maybe a caring role or something that maybe isn't less physical, maybe more administrative. Whereas I don't need to switch. I've always been an office type person.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that. I said family party will maybe develop more policy in this area, but I think there are difficult issues. These are the sort of issues that will give any government a headache because there aren't really easy answers to them. But thanks very much, Andrew.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll speak to you again soon. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I'm just going to turn my light on. I realized I've forgotten to put my light on here. Right, that's better. Maybe a bit clearer. Right, now that you've all donated on the Crowdfunder, I will bring on Arthur. Welcome, Arthur.
Well, yes, it's pleased to be on, Richard. I'm glad to be with you tonight.
Yeah, so Arthur is the pastor at, let me get the name right, Eastgate Church in Elderslie. Now, if you don't know where Elderslie is, that's just west of Paisley, is it not?
That's exactly, only a few miles from Glasgow Airport.
Right, okay. Now, I've heard Arthur speak on a couple of occasions, and he's got a bit of a profile, I would say, and is known, I would say, as a bit of a prophetic voice in Scotland. So delighted you could come along and discuss the state of the nation, if you like, and the way forward this evening. So, Arthur, do you want to tell us a bit about your sort of journey? Have you always been very aware of sort of social issues, moral issues in society, or is there something that you've woken up to more recently?
Yeah, well, yes. It's I'm very passionate for my nation, Richard, and I'm very disturbed at the way things are going. It seems to be moving very, very quickly now. Obviously, I can say I'm a 60s child. I was actually kicking around in the 50s in my mother's womb, so I just managed to be born in 1960. So I'm probably giving my age away. So I suppose if you look across, I was brought up with late call, and you'd finish your television at night with late call and a little dot, and I always think there was always still a bit of kind of godliness within the nation. Although I wasn't very godly until I get saved at the age of 26. But I think just now, and I think most people now, even younger than me, more and more people now are seeing a massive the onslaught of this avalanche of moral decay is frightening now, Richard, and it really does. It's you try and put your finger on it and say where did it begin? Where did it start? It's a little bit like the frog getting boiled in the water. You think, at which point did the frog actually be boiled? And but no, I'm just saying it's very, very disturbing. It's and I don't know if anybody's really got the answers, or you could put your finger on that point. But I think certainly since we entered into the year 2000, things have been moving very, very, very fast as far as the deterioration goes of a nation that was once seen to be a godly nation. It really is now crashing badly.
Yeah. So what are the symptoms? What are your main concerns?
Well, obviously, obviously the big issues that you very much addressed, Richard, which makes me very fond of you, is the amount of now the LGBT agenda or perversion is just now it's commonplace. It's now just so acceptable. Nobody seems to bat an eyelid. I was brought up in the days with Mary Whitehouse when she still gave BBC a roasting over the coals. Yeah, I think it's just. I think the scripture says, that the nation that calls good evil and evil good, and that puts bitter for sweet and sweet for bitterness. It says, "Woe to that nation." And yeah, I think now just perversity is just now just reaching new levels, especially transgenderism. Now it just seems to be commonplace, and even Boris Johnson is wishing well. I forget what MP it was. I wouldn't want to name him anyway. Is now deciding he's going to change his gender, and even the Prime Minister of our country thinks he's been very brave and congratulates him. And I think that just typifies exactly where we are as a nation now. That everything now everything is just so acceptable and such, and that would never have been acceptable in my day. Back 20 years or so.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Mary Whitehouse. I've been thinking of making a video about her soon. I remember years ago, she was a bit before my time. I don't really remember her in action, but I'm aware of she campaigned against basically sex and violence on TV and cinema, etc. I remember being in a group of Christians, and one of them said, "How can we fight back against this sort of thing without being seen like Mary Whitehouse?" And I was so annoyed that he said that. I was so annoyed. In other words, what he was saying was, how can we fight back against the sort of sexual immorality in the media? How can we fight back against it without getting criticized and mocked by the people who actually are campaigning for it and the people who are doing it? That was his question, effectively. I thought it's completely ridiculous. In other words, trying to distance himself from Mary Whitehouse. She must have been doing it wrong because she got a lot of flack. She was unpopular. She was mocked. So we obviously don't want to be like her. We're going to do it in another way where the people we're criticized are going to love us and say, oh, we really appreciate your feedback. I was really annoyed by that. Anyway, this BBC article recently, it said, oh, maybe she was right about pornography and things. But then it said, but she had views about LGBT issues that are obviously out of tune with contemporary society. But I thought, hang on, there's only 2 games in town, as far as I'm aware, though. There's the socially conservative traditional moral values, and there's like sexual license, liberty, promiscuity, whatever, which is the other side. And they're still the only 2 games in town, really. I've never heard an LGBT activist arguing for like sexual faithfulness within marriage, for example.
Yes.
So
exactly, and I want to say, just in case people quote me, Richard, I'm very simple. I was a very active sinner before I actually became a Christian, and now I find myself as a minister, and I am very sympathetic to people. I'm one of the persons, when I gave up smoking, actually I didn't become a demon against smokers after that. I realized the problem, and I'm very sympathetic to them. It's a bad addiction. So I don't want to be seen as if I'm crucifying anyone. But basically, I just see it's like everything now. It's as if the government and these people have got the high ground, Richard. They've got very loud voices. And if anybody dares raise a voice against it or raises another opinion against it, we get crucified and we get demonized as if, how horrible people we are, how intolerant we are. And I get that all the time. Sometimes when I'm out in the streets speaking to people and people come up and and you get accused of hate speech, or you're homophobic, or you're this phobic, or the next thing phobic. And I get angry with the fact that they have a license to be able to speak liberally, and yet when anybody from a moral perspective tries to raise their voice, everybody wants to they crucify us and actually would drag us to court, and the law seems to be very much, and yet they are technically a minority, but yet they seem to have that majority and very aggressive voice. And so yes, I do. It does annoy me that they have got the high ground, and they've been given the high ground, Richard, and that's the thing that I find very unfair as far as the media goes, and the way the culture is today.
Yeah, it's a worldwide movement, isn't it? But it's extremely powerful. And like you say, I find we were on the streets of Ayr, the high street in Ayr on Saturday, with a big sign saying basically a man can't become a woman. And the majority of people who reacted to it said, oh yeah, I agree. But the ones who disagreed, most of them were totally abusive. F you bunch of, you're mouthing off with complete confidence. Now, I would never want to talk to anyone like that. I would never want to do that. But if there was, say, for example, a transgender person wrapped in a transgender flag, and I thought I would like to go up to them and like give them a mouthful of abuse, I wouldn't dare do it, because I know they would just be straight on the phone to the police, and you'd be done. You'd be for it. But the other way around, people are completely confident.
Yes, I mean, this is what I want to keep saying, Richard. I'm very sympathetic for people who find themselves in this position. I mean, it's not an easy position for them to have taken. But now the liberty, everyone has the liberty now, and everybody. It reminds me of the days when everybody was coming out the closet and declaring themselves to be gay, and there was so much encouragement for them to do that with a particular persuasion of people. And but now we're finding so many people are beginning to now believe that they're a woman trapped in a man, or they're a man trapped in a woman. And the more you begin to teach that, especially, I get very angry now that we're actually teaching young children this, Richard. And that's why I was very pleased with you as a party that you took a stand against this when other parties are scared to touch this. And I don't know why, as if they think, oh, this might cost us votes. this is why I really admire a party that's taken a stand for moral issues and are willing to enter into that fight. But yes, I wouldn't be very. I wouldn't be very, antagonistic to these people. But in the same token, if they have a voice, and I have a right to have a voice as well, without them being aggressive towards that, and they have to understand the position that we take as well. And so, I think we need to have that fairness and the fair ground.
Yeah, the way I normally look at it is it's two competing visions of what's best for people. Because if we talk about the transgender issue, for example, if someone's experiencing gender confusion, say a young person, there's two competing ideas of the best way to advise that person or the best way forward for them. There's the way the school takes, which is, okay, you think you're a boy, okay, that's great, that's wonderful, and we're just really brave over to say so. As far as we're concerned, you're a boy now. And there's the other approach, which I think most parents probably take, where they'd say, whoa, let's just slow down a bit here. What's making you feel like this? This is probably not a good road to go down. Can we have another think about this? And that's the other point of view. So both parties we've got the best interest of the person at heart, allegedly. That's what they're trying to do. They've just got a different understanding of what's best for people.
Yes, the thing that really gets my back up immediately, Richard, is this is not the place for a school to be teaching this. The schools have got no right to teach this. This is and it's obviously it's coming from the government now, that basically we are pushing parents to the side, and the government is now trying to take the high ground, as if we will teach your children and we will decide what's good and what's not good. And this is what I'm finding more and more concerning at the moment, and it just again shows the aspect of the church has lost its voice, Richard. At one point, the church had a voice, and governments were scared to tread on this ground because they knew the church had a very strong voice. People listened to the voice of the church, and to our shame, unfortunately, Richard, we have lost our voice. And we have lost that influence now. We're living in very ungodly times now, and so people now no longer are looking to the church. But in saying that, Richard, though, I think we are realizing more and more. You did say at the very beginning, and you touched on it, that the church has got two faces. It's got two voices, and there's so many people in the church now are actually agreeing with everything which is totally unbiblical, and so the church basically now is basically, it's fighting against itself, and therefore this is why this is the dilemma that we find ourselves in, Richard. So we've given the high ground to the government, and the government now is the one who are playing the moral code now. They're the ones that's become the moral deciders, and they're the ones that's telling people now that we say this is good, we say this is okay. And I feel sorry for many people now, because the government is not speaking for God. In fact, they don't believe in God, many of them, and so the government now is playing God, which is a very dangerous stand that they have taken.
Yeah. So what you're saying about the church losing its voice, I'll come to that in a minute. I think part of the reason for that is that a large section of the church, as you said, doesn't believe traditional Christian moral teachings anymore. But another thing, I found this really interesting, because I found a couple of years ago, I had a meeting at Edinburgh Central Mosque. I went and had a chat with them. And the lady I spoke to, she said, we're a bit reluctant to speak out about moral issues at the moment, because we think Islam's getting criticized a lot. The spotlight's on us, so we think it's best to keep our heads down. And I've also heard that the people very high up in the Catholic Church in Scotland have said, after the sex abuse scandals and the other things go on, now's not the time for us to be speaking out. This is the time to be keeping our heads down. And then find a lot of Protestant Christians, their view is more, we don't want to be speaking out because we think that will damage the reputation of the church. It will put people off the church. They'll think we're not very nice, and then they won't come to the carol service. So it's not really our job to be speaking out. It's like so many people have got a reason why now is not really the time to be speaking out about these things. I mean, do you come across that with
Yes, unfortunately, that's very true, Richard. And I think we tiptoe around emotions and people's feelings now. We don't want to upset people, and now that this seems to have become normal, the church feels it can't speak out on it. And I'm of the opinion, Richard, that I'm answerable to God and God first and foremost. That I've got no right to be in the ministry. Therefore, I have to be answerable to God and not man. And the Bible is still a living word. It was the same yesterday, today, and forever. God doesn't change his mind. I like to say to people, Richard, that God is not evolving. God is. He says, I am. And I think sometimes, and this is, I won't mention the big names in Christendom, that they believe that, well, moving into the 21st century, we've got it wrong now, and they're apologising. Even our first minister, well, I can see why she wants to apologise to everybody, witches and and people who had been maybe persecuted from sexual offences in a day when it was a criminal offence. So and so the church likewise is beginning now to it's scared to lift its voice. It's now this rot has become so progressive now that we are beginning to believe that now God made a mistake in his word, when God's word is very clear as far as God is concerned with sexual relationships. God created man and created women, and for the whole purpose of procreation, that they will have children. I mean, this is the very order of God. It was the order of God from day one, and it's still the order of God from this day, and it will be until the end of days, Richard. And so God isn't evolving, God is. And God's word is eternal. It's an eternal word. And I think today within Christendom, and this is my big argument within Christendom as well now, that's these kind of modern day theologians, and we are now tearing the Bible to shreds, and we're now trying to reinterpret the word of God and say, well, it didn't really mean that. And these very clever clots are very good at, shall we say, of trying to kind of shall we say, just begin to undermine the word of God and make it say something it's not saying, Richard. And some of them are very good at doing that, I must confess. But the truth is the truth, Richard, and God's word is very clear. There's no shadows and types. God's word is very, very clear, and our ministers need to preach the word of God. And I thank God I've got a freedom. I'm an independent, so I'm not being told by a denomination to toe the party line. And unfortunately, Richard, this is what you've got now. It's become like a little bit like the union. You're being told from top down that this is the position we're taking, and everybody now to be in, shall we say, a particular denomination, you have to toe the denominational line. And it's very, very sad now, because I'm sure there's a lot of good people in all denominations who actually are not lifting their voice because they'll upset the hierarchy within that denomination. That's unfortunately true today.
Yeah, I think what's happened in our society over the recent decades is that the latest progressive bad idea will come along, and there'll be some opposition to it. Christians will oppose it a bit, maybe not as strongly as we might like, but they'll oppose it a bit. But then it passes, the law passes or whatever. Look at, say, same-sex marriage. I mean, that was a pretty big controversy, wasn't it, when that went through? It was a big controversy. But now, I mean, it's very rare to hear someone saying, they disagree with same-sex marriage. A lot of the MPs who voted against it, they now say, oh, I only voted against it because I got lots of letters from people. I was never against it. I was just, trying to keep my constituents happy. So things move on really quickly. Part of what we're doing in the family party is trying to say we can't just keep like fighting the next battle, losing it. Go to the next battle, lose it. Go to the next battle, lose it. We need to go back to basics and say these are the core principles that are vital for a flourishing society. And we've got to go back to those. Because if we keep just trying to fight the latest thing that's coming in, you start just being a bit reactionary and people don't quite understand your reasoning. So we feel you've got to go back to basics and present the whole coherent vision. I mean, in this case, the family party, vision for family life, children brought up by their biological mother and father who are married as the ideal. Going back to that basics. And we hope that position can make sense to people. Whereas just always fighting just the latest thing that comes along, maybe doesn't present a coherent position to people.
No, this is what I love about you, Richard. You're a straight talker, and you say what you say what you mean, and you mean what you say. And I love that with you. You've set yourself some strong principles, and you're sticking with them. You're not fudging them. You're not kind of sliding one way to the right or to the left. You've made your decision. You've taken the middle road. You've put your colours to the mast, and this is what kind of drew me to you in the first place, Richard. But yes, I think, Richard, we can never underestimate the power of media. I'm always telling my congregation, watch what you watch, because what goes through the eye gate and comes in through the ear gate actually has an influence. I always say this: people don't spend billions of pounds on billboards along the side of the road and this wasted money. Yeah. We are subconsciously, we are affected by what comes in. It's like whatever you eat gets digested. And so you've seen this sliding in through the media a long time ago. You got a lot of kind of gay scenes, I remember there was, not that I watch television, I only seen on the news I might add, there's going to be the first kiss on EastEnders when a man's going to kiss another. And it began very, it was building up for that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then when it happened, and now it's like, it's commonplace. And the more people watch it, it changes them. The media is get powerful. People never underestimate media. That's why your big newspaper moguls in the past have always bought up newspapers, because they know they can influence people by what they read, what they watch. And so the television is the golden calf in the wall, and everybody's got them all over the house now. So, I was brought up in the day with a black and white TV, and that's me really showing my age. I think it was 1967 when colour came in. And the telly finished, that was You to the morning again. But now it's 24/7. It's glorified. Anything you want to watch, you can watch. We can Google anything. The airwaves are polluted. Pornography is commonplace. Even most movies now, I think, when you used to be able to have a rating of an 18, now a 12 would probably be an 18, and back, so the whole standards has changed, and that seems to be the case now. So the nation has been polluted. It's been polluted by an agenda. It's not just happening. It's been a driven agenda. This has been driven, and they are changing the culture, deliberately changing the culture in the nation, and it's been drip fed in. But now it's a little bit like an avalanche. Now it's moving so fast, and unfortunately, the church should have been the voice and should have been God's representative. We should have been living up a standard, and unfortunately, we actually are part of the problem now, because now there's a lot of things coming out of the church that makes me, it just makes me very angry. Yeah.
To go back to film classifications, I watched a few films recently, some old films, and they'll sometimes have a little warning at the beginning. It will say, warning, the values in this film are not in accord with contemporary values or something. I always think, no, I think that's a good film. I want a warning on a lot of modern films saying that the values in this film are appalling. But it's a classic case, though, calling evil good and good evil. And I find that with the BBC News is atrociously biased. But then that's the least of the problems. It's all the other programs. Because with the other programs, people's guards down. I always remember years ago, I watched an episode of Casualty. I don't know why I watched that anyway. That must have been, I watched an episode of Casualty, and it was about a little group of pro-life activists, a vigil or whatever, going on outside an abortion clinic. And the whole story was geared to make these people into the baddies, to the point that in the end, they caused a car accident somehow. They caused a car to swerve that ran someone over. The whole story, it's like start with a blank piece of paper, write a story to make these pro-life activists the baddies. And that's what they did, and that's what they put out. That was one of the first things I remember watching on TV that made me think, whoa, what's going on here? The whole thing is engineered just to ram home its message. But that's just routine now. In films, television, drama, everywhere.
Yeah, it's certainly got that. It's got that drama. It's got that impact. I was raised in the days with the Waltons, and the Little House in the Prairie, and they were filled with great values. Good boy, good night, John boy, good night, Marianne, good night, and it was really, it was filled with good values, and people watched that and it reflected the values. These values, kids were growing up with them now. Now children are sitting watching. Unfortunately, they're watching 18. They're watching horror movies. most of these video games now, young children are playing them, and it's running people down, and they're so graphic, Richard. So, I mean, they're feeding on a diet of violence, of sexual immorality, and then we wonder why our teenagers are growing up the way they are. And I'm very, very sympathetic to our teenagers. It's easy to look at them, say, look at them and the louts, or whether there's a lot of violence, or there's a lot of, I'm looking at a number of girls now falling pregnant at the age of 14, and all of this. And actually, we are to blame. We've fed them a diet of violence, of sexual filth now that just seems to be flying out the airwaves. Even these pop stars that make the videos, that most of them are all just very graphically. I mean, it's all sexually orientated, or it's heavy violence, or the lyrics. Everything is, we are sewn into the children. We are actually literally indoctrinating our children with this mentality, and then we wonder why the nation is in the way that it is, Richard. Yeah.
I mean, it's widely acknowledged that there's a youth mental health crisis going on. But in the Parliament, what's the solution to it? We need to spend more money on counsellors and therapists. Which, okay, fair enough. If the problem already exists, try and help people. But they've got no idea of trying to get to the root of it. I think as you were saying, it's a toxic culture that we're bringing children and young people up in. So even as families try their very best to present positive values, the other influences can be so strong. And with the internet now, if you start going down a wrong route on the internet, you can just absorb 12 hours of it a day, all week. You can just totally overdose on something that's really unhealthy and dangerous. I think we're seeing that's one of the reasons that's resulting in these huge problems with young people. But I think the existing Parliament, as I say, it's completely unable to get to grips with any of the root causes of it.
Yeah, I think, technology is a wonderful thing, Richard. I mean, getting smarter and getting more, getting more clever. I mean, it's wonderful. There's a lot of benefits to it, but unfortunately, what's against this technology now is what against us, Richard. We are now living in a world now where the technology now is just, children are all running around with mobile phones. They can access everything and anything, and now it's basically that's our biggest problem now. Once families could protect your children, you cannot protect your children now, Richard. You can't once you're able to shut the doors and have walls around you now. But unfortunately, the internet, it's like they've tunneled under and they've got access to our children now. And you try and take a phone off a teenager, then you're in danger of you're in danger of them attacking you violently. In fact, I thought with the teenagers now that rather than trying to take them to court, and they laugh at court sometimes. I'm under 16, you can't touch me. I think if you threaten to take the phone off them for a month, we would maybe get them to behave far better. So the technology is a massive problem now. As much as it brings a lot of good, unfortunately, it's brought all the bad as well, and a lot of parents struggle with that.
Let's look at a couple of comments. Ambulance down in the valley when a fence at the cliff is needed. Absolutely. I say with young people in the Scottish Parliament, it's all about, well, same with family life in general. Their attitude is, how can we pick up the pieces? Which is good. That's quite right. That's what a government should try to do, to try and help people to pick up the pieces when things have all gone wrong. But they've got no vision for trying to stop things going wrong. They just don't get that. So, quite agree. Toxic culture. Yeah, I mean, toxic, poisonous. I think poison is a really good analogy for what's going on. If you're presenting something that's dangerous and harmful and people are consuming it, then I think, it's that's absolutely right. Phone's been a big problem. There's something else I thought I was going to bring in. Right, that was an interesting one. Right there, Francesca. I'm 50. More girls got pregnant when I was at school. I would say to that, maybe that's true. The teenage pregnancy rates in Scotland are not actually that high, but why is that? To what extent is that abortion? 14,000 a year. And even if, because as far as the Scottish government's concerned, if schoolgirls have sex but don't get pregnant, then that's a win. As far as they're concerned, that's great. They're perfectly happy. But then what happens to that girl through life when her capacity to form stable relationships has been undermined, family breakdown, children affected? So I think in Scotland, the strategy is to reduce pregnancy. Well, there's some degree of success there, but by what means? I think often the early and promiscuous sex has very serious consequences through later life. And then the morning after pill as well is quite widely used, which I would class as a form of abortion as well. So
Yeah.
that's just a few comments to bring in. So what can we do? From the situation we're in, dire as it is, what do you see as the way forward, naturally or supernaturally?
Well, I can only see one way, Richard, and we need an intervention from God himself. The nation now has slipped into such a polluted state, and it amazes me. Everybody thinks, well, what's wrong with it? I remember once when I did a study, and we thought, well, I'm sure if we went back to the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, and if you interviewed people who was in Sodom and Gomorrah in that day, I think, do you think you are really wicked? That God says that you are very wicked and intolerable. I'm sure there would have been an outcry. Says, we're not wicked, because as far as they were concerned, that was just normal practices. Or in the days before the flood of Noah, so when man measures himself up with man, we think we're doing okay. But when you measure yourself up with God, you realize, no, you're not okay, and we're very offensive to the living God. And at one time, this nation once had a moral code, and people obeyed the moral code, and people lived under that moral code, and people did abstain until they were able to get married. It was a done thing, and if a man dared to get a woman pregnant, he had to marry her. Or else he would have been the talk of the town. Now, I mean, I'm not being unkind, but I know women now just, they get 3 or 4 different fathers, and I've got a couple of children, and nobody seems to bat an eyelid. It just shows you now. And then because once you let that become the norm, then that's just going to be the norm, and you're going to continue. It's just as you said earlier, we have to go back to basics, and we have to bring back a moral. We have to have a moral code. The government's in free fall. The government now is just allowing anything, and we're seeing now this manifested again in our schools. I think someone's going to have to stop this, and the only thing we need, it's like we need the gospel. We need God to move again. We need an intervention of God, Richard. And as a minister, I know the only answer to the problem is God. I don't think we could come up with some good plans or some good policies and think we could policy ourselves out of it. Let's make some new, a new party, and no, it's in such a place just now. It's only God that can come to the rescue. And as I says, my heart goes out to these young people. I was a bit of an upstart myself. Fortunately, I wasn't necessarily violent, but I was very loose living. And so we've been there. We've got the T-shirt. When you're young, you're full of, shall we say, the wrong. You want to go out and have a good time, and a good time would have been all the wrong things. But that we have to again go back to our roots. I put a little post on today on my Facebook, Richard, and I think this just typifies everything. I was very angry last Sunday because, again, we have the old firm. It just shows you how they did. They've got no thought now of the Sabbath that once we were. And there was Celtic and Rangers playing last Sunday, 12 o'clock again, right across, shall we say, the Sabbath and the church, a day when the nation would have been going for God. And so then I thought, well, thank goodness it's not Easter. Then I just found out the other day, Celtic and Rangers are going to play on Easter Sunday, the semi-final. And that's taking place at 2 o'clock this Sunday. So I put a little notice on my Facebook, and I says, and I remembered the nation of the days with Eric Liddell, Chariots of Fire, one of my favourite films. And he was a Scotsman, the flying Scotsman, a godly man who refused to run. And he trained for 2 years, trained for the 100 meters, and he was a favourite to get the gold medal, but he refused to run because his conscience says, no, this is the Sabbath, and I refuse to run. So I flagged that up, and I brought that out. But maybe people will look at that now, Richard, and probably maybe mock that. But I just think, again, it's just where we are as a society. Nobody cares now about God. Nobody's interested about church. Churches now They're closing 10 to the penny. So not just then, that's just a reflection of what they think about God. God, you know, we're living in a very godless times, Richard. And it's only we need God to move, Richard. This is why I'm passionate. I'm passionate about God. I'm a man who continuously cries out to God. I've got a love affair with Scotland. I said, right, I do believe God has got a vested interest in Scotland. I mean Britain as well, but Richard, we live here in Scotland, so I want to be very clear with that. God has got a plan, and but I still feel that the heart of God breaks over this country because there was such godliness in this country and a day gone by, and now the nation has just turned its back completely upon God, and there's no moral code anymore. I mean, I was brought up in a day when you were driving down the road, you knew which side of the road you were driving down, Richard. There was right and left. There was the traffic lights, red and green. Now we don't know, Richard. There's no moral guidance now. So everybody's confused, you know. So, you know, I don't want to be a man anymore. Okay, I'll become a woman now, you know. And you know, it just, there's just so much now that's just, that just is very sad. Very, very, very sad. And now Scotland has a reputation of being the drug death capital of Europe, if not the world, Richard. Now, here, this is. I don't know if anybody doesn't see that. The statistics is so sad. I mean, I've did a couple of funerals. There was a young man, and this came along to my church, and he threw himself in front of a train, you know, and just, you know, there's just so much now. Sin doesn't come by itself, Richard. It brings everything else. There's no such thing as free sex. There's no such thing. You know, once you've lost your virginity, you've lost it, it's gone. And then, you know, you think it's not a case I can sleep around in as much as I want. And people don't realize the AIDS and all kinds of venereal disease is on a massive high just now. And so there's nothing for nothing. And, you know, and once you lose the sacredness of you know, of all the good things that God gave us. I mean, thank God that God made marriage should be a delightful thing, a man and a woman that we can enjoy in sexual union. And when everything's done according to the plans and purposes of God, then it's done in God's order. I mean, God's a good God, but now we everybody's doing their own thing, and it saddens me, Richard. Yes, and but no, the only answer, Richard, is we need a move of God, and that's what I cry out for. That's what I pray for. I still get into the streets. I take the good news. I take the gospel out. Usually, I'll get laughter. You know, the ones that upset me the most is not the young people, Richard. It's that kind of older. There's some people just walk by and shake their head at you, and it's usually that kind of elderly kind of generation, as if, you know, they look at you as if you're some sad case as you want to talk about God in the high streets.
Yeah. Just what you were saying there, I think there's a huge deliberate project going on to cover up the harms done by a lot of ideologies. So, for example, in terms of drugs, in terms of promiscuous sex, in terms of other sexuality, gender issues, I think there's a huge deliberate project just to cover up the actual negative effects. I mean, again, I don't want to go into detail. I mean, for example, some of the sexual practices that are promoted to school children, presented to school children as perfectly valid, it's as though they're deliberately trying to obscure the dangers and the problems associated with it. The same with drugs, alcohol, lots of other things. It's like they're determined that nothing's going to challenge the sort of permissive, progressive mindset, no matter how much damage it does. In terms of like the way forward, I tend to think that the more the truth is spoken, then the more good that can only do good in a society. Now, it may be, again, sort of talking from a Christian point of view, it was Ezekiel, I think, he was told that his job was to speak the truth.
Yes.
He said people might listen, they might not listen, but your job is to speak the truth. He said, I'll make you as tough a nut as they are.
Yes.
Because they're really tough, and I'll make you as tough as them. And you speak the truth. When you've spoken the truth, your job is done. Now, as the family party, we seek to, now I would say part of what we're doing is appealing to people's consciences. There are a lot of people who would already agree with our principles, but there's other people who maybe they've never thought about these positions. They've never been challenged. But I believe there's something to appeal to in people with their conscience that can wake people up and make them think, no, hang on, no, I think there is something going wrong in our society. Now, politically, I hope that means they're going to vote for the Scottish Family Party. Spiritually, I think that can be a step on the road towards someone thinking, yeah, what's going on here? What's missing? And a lot of people are coming to the conclusion, yeah, I can see what's missing. It's those Christian values we used to have.
Yep.
We've lost them. And that's what we need. Now, obviously, that's a far cry from becoming a Christian. But surely someone who's thinking, I wish we had those Christian values back, is someone who's going to be more open to the message of Christianity, I would suggest. Yet I fear in many cases that there's people who are thinking, oh, really, if we could just have those Christian values back,
Yes.
that would be a much more solid foundation for our society. Then they might go to church and listen to preachers who are embarrassed to talk about them because they think that would put people off, so scare people off. And I think that's increasingly what's happening. People have been attracted to the church by our values. It's a beacon, and there's a values vacuum in our society, and the church should be a beacon. People are attracted to it, but then find, that the church is embarrassed by the very values that people would be attracted by.
Yeah, and the strange thing is as well, Richard, that it's as if ministers now are scared to talk about politics because, we will let everybody make up their own mind. I'm sorry, I've encouraged my congregation, and I will encourage them before these local elections. I says, know who you're voting for. I mean, I don't know why everybody gets so caught up. It's independence. Right, okay, well, what does independence look like? Let's look at the small print. What's the policies? Also, you're independent, but you've got all these terrible policies which are totally against our Christian moral values. When we go to the polls, we should be voting for the party that's going to represent moral values, because I'll be answerable to God. If I'm voting for a party that is promoting all these terrible things that we spoke about, Richard, then I'm going to be held accountable for God. My vote should be with those who are actually going to be promoting a moral code that I can find, that I can say amen to. I'm happy to put my X or my tick against that box. And I will encourage anybody that's listening to this tonight that as a Christian, we have a duty to vote for the party that's going to be promoting a moral code. And rather than voting for these main parties, because all of the main parties, to be truthful, are all swinging from the same tree. They seem to all went down this particular road. And so I'm encouraged when there was a party like your own party, Scottish Family Party, that is representing its family values, is representing values that actually is the glue for this nation. This is the values we need to make the nation a good nation, a safe nation, a nation that we can feel proud of, Richard, to be part of. And that's what the nation is screaming out for. It's the only answer to our nation is turning back to God and getting, even I know many elderly people now, they might not even be Christians, but I'll tell you this, Richard, they're absolutely devastated by the way things have went.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But just things Arthur was saying about the political side. But a lot of that's what my book Christians in Politics is about. Go to Amazon, buy a copy if you'd like a copy. But I think I'm often challenging people. One of the challenges I put out, someone just made a comment about this in the, I think on YouTube. They said, I'm a Christian, I'm in the SNP. What I would say is, are you happy to express support for a party that is killing thousands of unborn children every year? So is that not a deal breaker for you? Because I would suggest that should be a deal breaker. Doesn't matter what you think of their other policies. If they kill 14,000 unborn children a year, then that means you can't vote for them. You can't express support for them. That's my view. Now, I've never heard anyone come back to me and say, I believe a Christian can vote for a party that kills thousands of unborn children a year because. That's what I would love someone to answer that question, but I can't get anyone to come and debate that or to come and argue the other side, because I think they realize it's a very difficult question to answer. People are trying to compartmentalize their mind, if you like, have a section for politics, a section for their moral values, maybe founded in their faith, and they sort of want to keep them separate from each other without facing up to the implications of it. So that's a message we absolutely endorse. Vote for what you believe in. Vote according to your conscience. And don't let, like we were saying earlier, don't let the media set your priorities. But you can watch political coverage on the TV for months on end, and there will be not a mention, for example, of the killing of unborn children. Not a mention. So the danger is people will watch the TV politics coverage and think, oh, well, abortion mustn't be a proper political issue because they don't talk about it on the telly. So that shouldn't really determine how I vote. I should vote according to what they talk about on the telly. But you've got to set your own priorities, not let other people set the priorities for you.
Listen, absolutely, Richard. And again, I want to say, because maybe people are watching me and think, oh, I'm very sympathetic to women who've had abortions as well, because I don't blame them, because I've been told by a government, look, this is good. There's nothing wrong with this. We seem to make the baby out now just to be, it's not really human anyway until we get to a number of weeks that they choose to number the weeks. And we know that actually they're moving the weeks up as well, Richard, certainly in other countries. And it's only a matter of time here they want to move it up to full term. I usually say to women, when women say to me, it's my body and I can do what I like with it, I'll turn to them and I'll say, that's true. It is your body. You can tattoo it. You can dress it up. You can put makeup on it. You can do your hair. I said, but what you don't realize is, but you're carrying another body. And you can't do what you like with that body. You can do what you want with your body, but you're in a privileged position that you've got another body now, and you can't do what you like with that other body. And and you know, I think a lot of women are pressurized, and because the government at times is very persuasive, Richard, and they make it now, oh, I'm pregnant, oh well, you know, let's just go and have an abortion as if it's, you know, it's nothing. So I'm very sympathetic to a lot of people now, because they don't know they're doing wrong as far as God is concerned, because they've got a government that actually is saying, we say this is good. Well, but the Bible does not say that. And you know, and if you want to, you either live according to the government, or you want to live according to God, but God knows best.
Yeah. Could you just answer this? The SNP did not pass the Abortion Act. To be honest, I don't think that's a very strong point at all. Okay, who cares who passed it? The fact is that the SNP government killed 14,000 unborn children last year. You may say, oh, the government didn't kill them. Yes, it did. The NHS is a government agency.
Huh?
So a government agency funded by the government in accordance with government policy killed 14,000 unborn children last year. So that government is responsible. That party is responsible. Every member of that government is responsible. Every member of that cabinet bears collective responsibility for that indiscriminate industrial scale slaughter. I think I'm not trying to be melodramatic. I'm just trying to be logical and face up to the facts. So that's my view on that. I just wanted to say one more thing before Arthur. I'll let you have the last word. Let me just take that off. A couple more things, actually. One is Arthur has very kindly invited me to speak at his church on the 1st of May, Sunday the 1st of May at 11:45. If you're
10:45.
10:45. If you're in that area, I'm not recommending you miss your own church to come, but if you're in that area and you wanted to come along, you'd obviously be very welcome. Also, just to mention our crowdfunder again. Do chip into our election campaign. That would be much appreciated. And the last thing I wanted to say, obviously, Arthur's Christian, very passionately. I'm a Christian as well. In a couple of weeks' time, we've actually got a Muslim coming on, a Muslim from an organization that helps people experiencing same-sex attraction and gender confusion. We've had a Muslim on before. Other weeks, now we have atheists. So as a family party, we don't say to people, you've got to leave your faith out of it. If your faith's an important part of your values, then come and talk about that. That's great. But just to clarify, the Scottish Family Party is not an explicit, it's not a Christian party. We're a secular party in the sense that we unite around a set of policies, but people support us often because of their values related to their faith. I say we're quite happy for people to be entirely open about that. So Arthur, it's been fantastic to talk to you. You've been passionate and inspiring. And we would love to see you again. Have you got any a parting shot for us before we wind up? We've run on a little bit, but I was enjoying listening to you so much ago.
Listen, the reason that I've invited Richard to the church is because, not only we want to get a flavour of the man, and we're going to get a flavour of the man as well as he'll probably then be able to speak a little bit about what the Scottish Family Party represent, especially leading up to the 5th and that voting day. So I thought that was very important. And again, I just want to encourage everybody that we've got a duty to be able to vote with a clear conscience. And I amen what Richard says. And I know there's probably a lot of kind of good people in all the parties. I'm not decrying that. But I would like to try and get a voice in Parliament that's going to be speaking up against the everything that was discussed just now, and there's so much more. I mean, drug addiction. We're seeing poverty. We're seeing many things, and I would rather have a party in there that is God conscious, and so yes, I just want to encourage anybody that's listening that this is not a witch hunt against anyone. I mean, we're real people. We understand real life. But I do believe that God is the answer, and I want to encourage you that God is the answer. He was the answer to my life, and it can be the answer to your life. And thank you, Richard, for hosting me tonight. So praise God. Amen.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Until next time.
Thank you.
You'll come back and join us in a few months. Right, everyone. Thanks for watching live, or if you're watching later. I'm sure you found that as interesting and inspiring as I did. I will see you next time. Right. Goodbye.
Bye.